Condemned 2 is the sequel to Condemned: Criminal Origins. It follows the continued story of ex-agent Ethan Thomas. Atmosphere. The game's visuals portray a town where everyone has given up on maintaining anything and are just fighting amongst themselves pointlessly. Dereliction and abandonment are featured in nearly every part of the game. Anarchy reigns and there's a feeling of hopelessness, like society has already fallen. Despite the unpleasant scenery and the darkness of the levels, I never found it particularly creepy or eerie, with the exception of the SCU building and the lodge. The first arrival at the snow-covered lodge was the only part of the game where there was a brief feeling of apprehension and dread. The nightmare section seemed to force a frankly irritating number of visual effects on the screen which made them really annoying to go through, but the rest of it just didn't really do anything for me. Maybe I've seen environments like this too much to let them affect me, but the atmosphere of the game never felt it did very much. No Harry Masons. Scares. Besides the bear in the lodge and the unsettling exploding dolls from the toy factory, there wasn't really anything I found scary in the game that I remember. The game was just walking through nasty environments and beating people up. The combat wasn't frightening like it used to be, despite it staying mostly the same. The inclusion of quick-time events to get extra damage and combo counters made it feel like an arcade game more than a fight for survival. Still no Harry Masons. Sound design. I actually really like the soundtrack in this. Bit-crushed drones and ghostly synthesized chords give an air of suspense as you walk through the corridors. Some of it sound like stretched out screams that drag on into a nauseating wail. They've implemented some decent 3D audio which made listening for enemies interesting with headphones, and the sound effects of hitting people with pipes and shooting people were all pretty damn satisfying. That's one Harry Mason. Gore. The game goes above and beyond with this. Decapitated remains of Malcolm Van Horn are probably the most memorable part of the whole experience. His body torn to shreds and opened up like the workings of a machine. There's a lot of body modification horror too, with mouths surgically stretched wide and pinned back, and there's various torture devices in the game too. The nightmare sequences seem to contain enemies made of something that looks like tar, and smashing them to pieces is pretty nasty. The crime scenes you investigate too are soaked in blood and body parts. That's two Harry Masons. Story. The story is the biggest letdown for me. It starts off showing Ethan as a washed-up alcoholic picking bar fights and hallucinating before he's suddenly asked back to the agency to try and help find Malcolm Van Horn. Whilst the early game is pretty engaging with some creepy murder mysteries, it really goes off the rails trying to explain lots of things the first game never bothered to, and it makes things less believable for it. The ending is just bizarre, and it's really disappointing to see such a tonal change taking place. It seems a bit fractured too, with characters who were killed in-game suddenly making a full recovery in the cutscenes later. The whole thing feels pretty inconsequential and nonsensical, making the final score 2 out of 5 Harry Masons. It feels like they didn't think this through very well. The game doesn't really stand out in anything besides its score. Also, making the player answer questions and do research to provide a score for detective work felt like a drag after a while too. It's trying too hard in areas it didn't need to. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games. If you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I was grossed out by Malcolm Van Horn, I did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer, and I advise you don't either. There'll be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. And always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.